Good afternoon. It's Lee Cassidy from Tactile Technology with our In the Hot Seat on a regular 2 o'clock slot on a Tuesday. We're having fun today because a guy came to decide to replace my electric meter about 15 minutes ago. So he's in the process of doing that. So I'm actually connected over my phone on 5G and he's just turned the power back on. We're all in the middle of things at the moment. But anyway, we've got my guest today, which is Charlie Winton. So let's have Charlie in. How are you,
Nice.
Charlie?
Very well, thank you. Thank you very much for having me on. It's great. Obviously met you this morning, so it's great to be here and chatting this afternoon.
Yeah, but you've got such a good story to tell us later, especially when we get to the end, we talk about OK Positive. But what we're going to do is kick off really a bit more about where it all began. Where did you grow up? Your parents, what were they doing for a living? The kind of things you did at school that you enjoyed, things that you're good at, and what your plans were. What you were going to be, a train driver, you were going to be a pilot or whatever. So tell us a little bit about that beginning stage. So where were you born and brought up? What do your parents do? And give us a bit of background of Charlie.
Well, yeah. So my whole family were up in Scotland, but as you'll tell from my accent, moved down to London. Had me there, and my two brothers lived in London for a short period before moving to Silverstone, just in Northamptonshire area. And there kind of went to school. Studied there until I was about 16 years old and then moved off back to Scotland again. But yeah, my parents, my mum was a makeup artist, so I used to travel around a lot, all over the world, really doing different films, and I managed to tag along.
So it's film makeup, not because there's people do makeup for like models. There's all sorts of different types of makeup. So it's predominantly films.
Yeah, predominantly films. So I managed to hop along to these film sets like James Bond and The Mummy Returns, all this kind of stuff, and be able to.
Oh, so quite a few people, ones we'd know then.
Yeah. So quite a few different ones. I think the James Bond was Die Another Day. Managed to see the Ice Palace, which to my amusement wasn't made of ice, obviously, as it's just a film. Yeah. But yeah, so that was my mum was a makeup artist, and then moved into working at Oxford University in the Maths Institute, supporting the professors there, and then. My dad is still a trophy maker. He makes trophies for sports competitions. So yeah, things like the golf and the rugby and sailing and things like that.
So was that the reason why you ended up at Silverstone then, was it? Because there's a big sporting venue there.
Yeah, so I think it was more the centre of moving out into the countryside a little bit more, but being able to be close enough to London to go there for work and things like that. So moved out there, and then my parents separated and kind of moved up. So we moved all over the shop really, just along into the countryside, and then my mum moved to Middle Barton in Oxfordshire. So yeah, saw different parts of the countryside rather than being in London, which I actually, now I'm older, I much preferred the idea of not being in a city centre.
Yeah, I think when you're young, a city is quite good because you've got everything around you. But as you get older, you want to be able to escape it as well. So you'd rather travel to it, when you want that type of life. But then you can escape again back into your own, rural, quietness and bit of tranquility.
Yeah, so for me, that's why I find that Edinburgh, where I live now, is a perfect mix. Really, you've got nice city centre, busy, lots of things going on, but then you've also got the hills and the mountains and the countryside and in the backdrop, so you can always go there. You're only 25 minutes away from wild camping and things like that. So yeah, it's the best of both worlds, I'd say. And I think it was just voted something like the #1 place to visit in the world at the moment, or whatever, for 2022. So I'm guessing that's a good plug for the Edinburgh Fringe coming up.
Yeah, definitely. So 16 to 18-year-old Charlie. So what were you planning to do? Do you have a plan, or was it, I'm going to go to university and then I'll think about what I do in another 2 or 3 years' time?
Yeah, so I had a really weird kind of dream. Originally I wanted to be a marine conservationist. I loved anything to do with sharks, fish, marine life, dolphins, whales, you name it. I love that area. I never really took that any further. I wanted to then, I got to school and I started playing rugby. So I wanted to be a rugby player shortly after that. Obviously with my mum working in makeup, it was between that, watching the Rugby World Cup, or going to set to be an extra and start seeing what acting life was like. And I chose watching the rugby. So I think I'd kind of made my decision there. obviously injuries, things like that, wasn't particularly good enough to go all the way in rugby, but that was just something that was in the back of my mind to give it a go. From a work perspective, I never thought I'd go to university really. I just kind of got through the next goal sort of thing. I went through school and enjoyed myself. And then thought, well, what will be. I wanted to go on a gap year to New Zealand, but never materialized. So I went into clearing in university and went and studied sport and exercise science, because that was the thing I was probably the most successful at school.
It fitted alongside the rugby, didn't it? Then you got that experience, so it fitted quite well. So what happened after that then? So you finished your degree in sport. What did you do with that, or did you go a different direction again?
So yeah, from a sports perspective, that was as far as it went for me, other than playing club rugby and doing a bit of coaching here and there. I decided to go off for a miniature gap year sort of thing, to go, and I was a scaffold labourer in Australia to see a different part of the world, be away from Scotland for a bit, and where I'd been in Edinburgh then for about 4 or 5 years. So I was like, I'm going to go see a new place. And yeah, I basically worked in 45-degree heat, shifting tons of steel with a bunch of guys in 45-degree heat. So it was a bit of a baptism of fire. Decided I wanted to come home and actually start a career rather than working abroad and traveling. So I came back and then fell into recruitment, actually, financial recruitment. A friend of mine worked for a business in Edinburgh city centre and said, would you like to come for an interview? I'll get you an interview. So I went in and managed to get the job there. So I kind of kept falling into different things. There was no real kind of script or path from that.
I think that happens with a lot of people. We all think we make choices, but what really happens is there's a fork in the road. Carry on doing what you're doing, or I take this other option. Yeah, and there's this other option, like you say, someone says, hey, I can get you an interview in this recruitment firm if you fancy it. And I've got a couple of dogs barking away at the electric meter man now. So I think I'll mute myself while you tell us a bit more about this recruitment job.
Yeah, so I fell into it, and you're right. For me, it's quite funny because I speak to a lot of different people from all the way from like 18 up to 25, 26, 27, and people still don't know what they're doing with their lives. They're always like, I've got so much anxiety around where I'm going to be, what I'm going to do, what do I want to do. And for me, it's always been go and trial by error sort of thing. I'll go and try something, and if it doesn't work out for me, I'll move on to the next thing and find something that works, because you can sit there umming and ahhing about something over and over again, but you could spend more time doing things and eliminating them in that sense. So I moved into recruitment, managed to get the job there. Really enjoyed the start of that. It was like, what is work? Putting on a suit every day, going to the office. It was 8 till 6. It was a fair grind. Had a great team of people that I worked with, very friendly. The training was good. And I really actually enjoyed getting people jobs, to be honest. That was something that.
So it was, you said finance, so it's a lot of different financial services businesses that were looking for people either starting out or potentially headhunting, was it as well, for more senior people?
Yeah, so for me, I was around the interim side of things. So it was very much short-term projects. So your purchase ledger clerks, accountants, probably the highest was around a management accountant kind of position rather than the finance directors, etc. Those are more senior level. That was probably more experienced people in the company at the time. So I was doing more of the, here's a 3-month role to get you some food on the table up to Christmas and get you Christmas presents bought, rather than your dream role, which probably didn't help. Because I could see people getting new permanent roles for people in the market, and they were getting thanked. It was just like you felt really good about your job because you're getting someone their next step or their dream role. Whereas I was kind of going, do you fancy doing some work for a couple of months?
But so you've got to start somewhere. You've got to build some expertise, haven't you? So, that first job, whatever it is a starting point for people.
Yeah. And for me, it was again, a baptism of fire, because it was very straining in terms of my mental health, which led on to what I did later on. But it was very much, it was too high pressure, too target driven, too KPI. And I started learning what worked for me and what didn't as an individual in the workplace. So for me, I thrived off of teamwork, being able to go through hustling for, speaking to people and creating networks and relationships on business development. I wasn't very good at cold calling people who just didn't want to listen to me or hear me because I had targets to hit. I wanted there to be a reason for me to do something. So I tried to find different ways to basically engage an audience. And so I started doing like financial news and putting that on LinkedIn and social media to say, look, here's something I'm adding, rather than just calling you up and saying, can we do your recruitment for you? So yeah, I learned a lot, but it was very different to what I expected.
Well, say it has changed a lot, hasn't it? The way that you connect with people. So, we're streaming at the moment into LinkedIn Live. We're going into Facebook and to YouTube. And many years ago, these things weren't around. But they're a big part of our lives now. Now, social media, but also they're a big problem in our lives as well, because we hear of lots of children, especially being bullied through social media platforms and many other things. So they're not always a positive thing, are they? These connections that we have, to the rest of the world.
It's like anything that you create. So the knife and fork were created to eat, right? But knife crime is one of the biggest areas of of horror in the world. So for me, it's like the internet's the exact same thing. There's good and there's bad to it. There's good and bad things to social media. It's how you use it, and it's how you protect, I suppose, safeguard people from that. Networking is brilliant, but then abuse and harassment can come with that, because if you're open to connecting and meeting people, there comes with it a risk of they might not be well intentioned. So I completely agree, but I think my experience has been probably more, well, I'm maybe lucky in that case, that social media has been really positive. I could probably count on one hand the negative interactions I've had on it. But I think it comes from the approach you take. For me, social media is about collaborating. It's about partnering with people. It's about sharing, give and get back. So it's not a case of, oh, I want this, give me that. And asking for things all the time. It's actually adding value yourself to people that could potentially benefit from your network or your expertise or things that you do. So you're right, it's something that is changing massively. Social media is veering towards the negative side because everyone has an opinion, and now everyone has the ability to say it without consequence on an anonymous profile. So hopefully that will change in the future, because everything I put online now, and from anything, whether it's social media, Twitter, Instagram, all these kind of things, anything I'll put on now, I think with my head on of how will this affect other people? Is there anything here that is coming across in a way that I don't mean? Because everyone can say something that they don't mean on a social media platform, and they've not worded it correctly or put in the right grammar, so it says something completely different. So you just got to be careful with it and make sure that you come across the way that you want to in all of your posts. Yeah, that's something.
I think you've got to think about it. Sometimes, like the old rule of, how would your grandmother react to the bit of information before you post it? Yeah, because it is very easy. I've been around in the industry a long time, and I remember the early days of email. When people started to use email, and we used to have this terminology called flaming, which is where somebody sends an email and the other person is not happy by the content of the email, and they send a really derogatory email back. So that was a flame. So you just don't think about it, and you can really respond really negatively to it. And that was a big problem with it. And now with social media, it's so easy to respond through different messaging mechanisms and things, and be quite abusive with people without thinking about it. And it can be a real problem for people.
Yeah, I found I learned that through the recruitment side of things, because you are constantly getting told you need to call this number, you need to call this list of people, you need to get through this amount of phone calls, 3 hours on the phone is the target, etc. So you're calling for the sake of calling rather than actually with any purpose, which can be not only like really degrading for you as an individual, but also the people that are on the other end of that phone are getting badgered, because you know full well that there's 7 other people in different companies doing the exact same thing to them. And I remember I learned that probably the hard way. I reached out to someone as I was told to, sent them an email, gave them a call, didn't get through to them, but sent the email, and I got a very, very long, angry email back about how I was a horrible person, how dare I call them and email them, all these different things. And I was like, well, it's probably the first time I learned more about kind of compassion and empathy. I sat there, and because I didn't really like the KPIs, to be honest, I didn't like the fact that I was calling people with no reason other than to say, can I do your recruitment for you? I thought it was not very inventive. And now what I know is that ultimately I put the shoe on the other foot, and I said, oh, God, that must be awful to have someone constantly sending you emails and badgering you. So I just sent a long-winded apologetic email saying, look, this is something I've been targeted too, but I would love to support you if there's any ways I could be more useful. If not, then I'm sorry, I can never contact you again, all this kind of stuff. And she came back very, very positively after that. So it taught me something, that actually some people do lash out or are abusive online that potentially don't mean to. They're having a tough day. You don't know what's going on in someone else's head. It's the same. The analogy I use is, you bump into someone in the street, or you bump into someone on the tube, or wherever you are on the bus, and they get angry at you because, even though it was probably their fault that they bumped into you, just remember there's something going on that person's world, that they probably aren't lashing out for no reason. There's something going on. So I think that's something for me that I've learned over time. I definitely didn't know that when I was younger. I would have got angry back.
That's it. It's a life skill, isn't it, to understand people? And I do quite a bit around empathy and understanding emotional intelligence. I'm involved with the military, and that's a big thing in the military now. Part of command and leadership is to understand people, because if you understand people better, then you can motivate them better, with that knowledge. And it's a real challenge. It's a real art as well to understand and get that empathy. But the other thing is understanding yourself as well, because a lot of people don't understand how they feel, and their mood and everything else is tied into how they feel about things and their reactions. But actually having that understanding of where you are and how you feel, and be able to effectively self-regulate is a key thing, because again, you can affect other people by how you are. So having that understanding of yourself as well as understanding of others is a really critical part of working with other people. And a lot of people are quite, they don't really understand themselves and mind other people. So it's a challenge for them.
Yeah, and I think that comes and circles back to the education side of things. When I was at school, we never got taught anything about mental health or moods or self-awareness or empathy or compassion. We were taught about religion. We were taught about sexual education. And we were taught about, ethics and rights and wrongs and things like that, which were probably loosely tied to religion as well. So for me, I never understood mental health when I was younger. I didn't understand it growing up. So when people lost a family member or were struggling or going through something, I didn't really understand it. I didn't understand why they weren't fine after an hour or so of just chatting to their mates, because I didn't understand what it meant, and that's an extreme case. I mean, obviously I was very young at the time, and as I've grown up, you tend to learn these things just from behaviors of your parents, behaviors of your family and friends and people But I just think there is a lack of education on mental health as a whole, because we're too scared to understand it, or we're afraid of getting it wrong potentially. So I think a lot of schools won't go further into mental health, and therefore it ripples effects as you grow up and you go into the workplace, and suddenly it's all about, because we're taught as young people, get the best exam results, be the best, get your house colors, do all these different things, get your commendation prizes, all this kind of stuff, come first, succeed, get to university. It's always about you being the best version of yourself, that you tend to forget about anyone around you. So you put yourself first so many times. It's very difficult when you get into a workplace setting and actually you've got a project with a bunch of people that you need to work on, and you're only looking out for yourself. So it's I think there's a lot of education could be put into that area that would solve a lot of things further down the line.
So you're in this recruitment role then, so what happened next, and did you continue on there? Did something else come up, or, tell us what the next stage was?
So I was there for about 18 months. I was relatively good at the job, believe it or not, for a newbie. And although I really started to hate and detest what I was doing, because it was that high volume recruitment, I could see people being stressed around me. We had a high turnover in the business that I was in, of people leaving because they were so stressed, also deemed not good enough. And I was like, well, it's very cutthroat here. The KPIs were getting on my nerves, the management, the stress, even though there were some great people in the business, and it was that the people I worked with were brilliant. It was just a model that created workplace stress, if I'm honest, and it took its toll on me. I used to have 3 or 4 panic attacks a day. I used to hide away in the company toilets in a fight or flight mode, where I used to play on a video game on my phone to get myself out of it, which I later realized was a distraction technique. But it was there that I would persuade or tell everyone, who thought I was just going to the loo 100 times a day, that's what I was doing. I just had a tiny bladder because I thought that was less embarrassing. And I didn't also want people to know that I was struggling because I wanted to be a manager. I wanted to, go further. I wanted to progress in my career like anyone does. And the issue for me there came about because I was like, well, I need to do something about this, because I started taking it home with me. I was a grumpy person to be around. I gained a load of weight. I couldn't exercise because of the working hours. I tried, trust me, getting up at 4:45 to go to the gym every morning for three months will eventually do it for you. I know you're probably military man. You probably think that's not very difficult at all, but for me, who likes a beer,
I'm not saying anything.
me who likes a beer on a weekend and watching some sport with friends, then yeah, that was tough. And I basically looked to myself and I said, I need to support my own mental health first and foremost. Oxygen mask on an airplane, save yourself before you can help other people. Because I started realizing this is something, if I can learn about it, I can be useful to the people around me. Because mental health is something that was definitely in my family with different things going on. I never really understood it, but I started to understand it more as I experienced it. And I think that's the same for a lot of people. When you experience your own mental health issues, you start to become very much aware of other people's, and you become very aware of what to do and what not to do in situations, and you want to understand and educate yourself on it. So I was like, right, let's look at all the mental health tools in the world. Let's look at everything. I want everything, soak it all in. I'm going to take a whole encyclopedia of this stuff, because I didn't want to pay for therapy. And I think a lot of young people in that particular position were like, 65 quid an hour, 45, 50 quid an hour on that, or dinner with your partner, or, a couple of drinks with friends, or a cinema trip, or a round of golf, 2 rounds of golf even. You're going to choose that over going to see a therapist, because there's a stigma with it as well. So I was like, right, okay, I'm going to look at self-awareness. I'm going to look at myself. I realized that there are 3 forms of mental health support predominantly. There's preventative, proactive, and reactive. And 99% of the world's solutions wait until you had a problem until they did anything about it. And for me, that just didn't sit well with me. So I started looking and going, right, well, let's look at the immediate. I need to quit my job, move to somewhere that's going to make me happier. So I did. I quit my job and I moved to a financial payments company where I worked 35 hours a week as opposed to the kind of 50 that I was working at my recruitment firm, and I made them roughly £700,000 more of profit a year. I know it's a different business, but I was working less hours. I was happier. I was more productive. So I started getting this picture in my head that there's a commercial win for businesses when they look out for people and they have happy people, because they're incentivized. They want to do well. And then from my perspective, I was like, right, let's build this product. Let's build OK Positive, because I want to solve my own problem. I wanted to be able to understand myself, to learn more about my moods and my trends, become more self-aware, so that I could then receive support for the things that I was struggling with, rather than being told, here's a load of yoga exercises, here's a load of mindfulness exercises, which I didn't really understand the reason for. And like any form of practice, now that I've learned about it, it's very useful, but it takes a lot of time for people to learn about it, and they need a reason. So I wanted to create a platform to give myself a reason to learn about mental health, to be able to help others with that information, and then also to be able to provide a voice into my company, because that recruitment business lost about 24 people in the 18 months I was there, in an office of 8. That's 300% turnover. That's about
That's a lot of churn, isn't it? That's a lot of churn.
£2 million of operating profit a year, and then paying off the lease early for another £250,000 because they run out of people. So financially for the business, I was like, look after your people, listen to them. If you change a few small things, the flexible working hours was an easy one, so that people could exercise, drop their kids off at school, pick them up. Like that's a simple win, which we now all know as businesses, but back then was, you can't change the hours of people's work. Hybrid working, KPIs was something we'd spoken about for the 18 months I was there. Just get rid of the KPIs or lower them so they're achievable, which incentivizes people. So then they do more. And then the management side, get more training in for managers so that there is more of a structure, because they had a lot of pressure on our manager, which was unfair. And so, if someone's having to look after more people than they can manage, or they've not necessarily managed before, then it can become a massive strain, which is unfair, because the team were brilliant. So yeah, just there were a few things they could have changed. It would have solved so much of a problem. So I wanted to give people the voice in companies in particular to be able to relay this feedback in real time, so that the company could do something with that, keep more people, retain more staff in that sense, and have less sick leave. Because I was wasting about an hour a day playing video games on my phone because I was having panic attacks. Like that's, if I'm a finance director or a CEO or a head of HR, that's quite a lot of money every
Yeah.
week being wasted. And for me, as a quality of life as a person, I didn't want people to go through what I was going through. In particular, it took my now fiance, to tell me, you need to quit your job. You're becoming a grumpy nightmare. So that was big hit home.
And if you think about it, it's not just that 1 hour that you're not productive. There's going to be other periods of the day, into that hour and after that hour that you're not productive as well. It's not, it's not a on-off switch, is it? Productivity. It's a gradual slippage either way, as well. So it's going to be much more than an hour of your day is going to be non-productive.
Oh, massively. And it's something businesses don't really seem to understand. They think, and I think eventually the world will move away from a time-based process of, you work 9 to 5, you work your core hours. I think it will be down to goal-based. I think it will be setting goals and hit those goals and earn time off. Because really, I've seen businesses over the last year change their way of thinking. So they'd see, one business in particular saw that they had 2 days per employee of sick leave due to mental health and stress. So, and they found out through surveying that it was because of the targets and the deadlines. So what they did was they lowered them for 1 month, and they looked at it and they agreed with the employees in that team what would be achievable. And then if they hit that target, no matter when they hit that target, they got 2 well-being days off. So what they've done is they've repositioned sick leave, where people are going off less productive, not wanting to come back, not going to be working as hard when they come back, into people who are motivated, respected, valued, earning time off, which they would have lost anyway as a company. But now they've got happier people, more productive, who want to come back and hit the ground running because they can earn more time off and they can spend more time with their loved ones. It's just a really simple, different way of thinking, which businesses are very, very slow at the moment of moving towards, I think.
So, how did this journey progress then from this company you were working with? You'd done the recruitment, you moved on to this payment company. Did you start positive straight away from there, or was it something you did in the background and got moving and then gradually built to the point where it could support you and then you moved over, or was there another stage in between?
Yeah, so I did it. So I read Eric Rice's book, The Lean Startup, while on holiday
Yeah,
at that recruitment firm, and
I've read that as well. A good book.
yeah, that's the way I wanted to do it. I wanted to build, measure, learn, and I wanted to do it myself. So built a team around me, but did it on a part-time basis. So when I wasn't working, so I worked for the financial payments company for another, I'd say, 2 and a bit years. And in the background, I was building this business. So working 2 jobs for 2 years, which actually ironically was less stressful than that recruitment job. So because I wanted to do it, I was incentivized. I wanted to build this product, and myself and a couple of the other members of the board I put in most of my life savings, and I've kept topping it up with bonus payments that I earned from my day job to build this product out and take it to a minimum viable product, and then start trying to sell it to companies. And it's kind of grown arms and legs from there. And now we're going to be launching an education platform for schools, as well as an offshore energy platform as well. So we found a framework. We built our technology up through working with a brilliant technology partner called Mindset AI. So we've now got AI and machine learning built into our technology, stuff that we've never been able to have early doors. So it's been a longer road, but it's definitely been one that has taught me an awful lot of what it's like to run a business, and the good and the bad.
So what does the business offer then? What are the major, either services or deliverables you can get from OK Positive?
Well, so what we did is we found that most businesses will have mental health first aiders. They'll have a consultancy potentially for workshops and programs. They'll have a mindfulness app or a service from like a Calm or Headspace. They'll have an employee intranet, surveys that they'll do, and an EAP, employee assistance program with therapy and things like that. So we kind of pulled all of that into one. So we provide that through our mental health application and platform. So first and foremost, we just want to help individuals with their mental health. So instead of being a mindfulness app, it will have 4 psychological models with different content and resources that learns from your behaviors in the app and your moods and trends without ever knowing who you are. Because what we want to do is we want to learn from that data and information that could help someone else who's very similar to you, but we do that through what you do in the app and what your moods and trends are. So it's not where you live, what your name is, your age, gender, all this kind of stuff. It's just about what you care about and your moods and your trends. So we do that for the individual, and we provide them all the resources of discounted or free teletherapy, discounts at healthy online retailers, content, suicide helplines and hotlines for moments of crisis, data and information, very much like Fitbit does for physical health, on trends and information that could be affecting you, but then linking that to support and signposting based on it. And then from an organizational perspective, we provide them with the aggregated moods of their people and the ability to intervene and make changes to that culture and basically have a blueprint of what your people are saying to then make changes and evaluate whether they work or not. So it's that full cycle of what I believe a wellbeing strategy should be, which is set targets. What do you want out of your wellbeing strategy? The same way you do marketing and sales, and then push out a platform that learns from your people, supports them in the interim, but allows you to make the decisions that really do affect your people. Because, I've always said this, it's not a business's job to deal with an individual's relationship at home or, that side of things, that personal things for that individual. That's them to be self-aware and to look after themselves and be proactive and preventative in that nature of supporting yourself with your mental health. A workplace's job is to ensure that the workplace doesn't aggravate it or make their mental health worse. It's their job to make it as positive as possible in terms of not toxic positivity, but make it a place where they will take feedback openly and they will make changes to get the best out of your people, because everyone knows now happy people are productive people, and that's good for bottom line. So yeah, that's a long-winded answer, but we do all of the above in one platform, and we try to make it as cost effective as possible, just because we want to help more people.
Who are your target audience for this then? Which type? Is it all organisations, or is it specific size or specific verticals that tend to use these type of services?
Well, yeah, we targeted initially the highest access stress index companies and sectors, your legal firms, your recruitment firms, your financial services, your social care. But then we realized that actually small and medium-sized businesses tend to care more about culture, to be honest. They also had less decision makers and red tape that they had to go through to implement systems. So we kind of found that startups, SMEs, up to your 250, 500 employees were the ones that really wanted to implement things and learn from it. But that's not to say that we wouldn't help corporates that are over a certain size, because that way you'll get a lot more data and information on how your people are doing and be able to discern more information to make a difference. So yeah, there is a target in the sense that we find that small and medium-sized businesses are more open to this change. I still think the workplace has a massive, massive way to go, a very, very long way to go in terms of utilizing well-being in the proper way as part of your retention, recruitment strategy, operations strategy, and getting the best out of your people, part of your sales and marketing strategy. Because if your people aren't presenting your brand the way that they should be, or they're not happy enough or inspired to do so, then your business is going to be worse off. So yeah, I just think we find that smaller businesses are the ones that really are taking the lead on this.
So what type of outcomes are you getting, from a individual's perspective? What type of outcomes are you getting? People are looking like they're happier in the workplace because of this. What kind of outcomes are you getting for the organisation that utilises it?
So we focus on like 3 or 4 main areas. We look at engagement. So engagement is a sign if they're using the application. We know that everything from a clinical perspective is reducing like the stress, anxiety, and depression triggers in individuals. So that's a good sign. So our engagement's around 61% retention. At the industry average around 30%, and employee assistance programs are around 1 to 10%. And then our teletherapy and EAP side is 30% engagement, which is traditionally between 1 to 5% across the board.
So quite high.
So engagement's one, mood ratings is another. So we have a mood rating out of 100 that we can then look at as a data trend, and we also then focus on communication and intervention, so successive intervention. what I mean by that is the data will show that anxiety because of the commute is causing the most stress in your business. So we would then recommend changing your working from home policy to a hybrid working model. They push that out and we see what the difference and changes in mood rating from there. We've also seen changes in engagements, like announcing changing an IT system to support a particular team has seen an increase in 10% in mood rating. So we've got the ways to measure and evaluate the success of different interventions. So that's the engagement side and usage, because we know that everything in the application is beneficial for users. We don't grade it on happiness because a lot of the 4 psychological models are transdiagnostic, and also people aren't happy all the time. It's just not something that will ever happen. And it's also not something we should focus ourselves on. Noticing how you feel is so much stronger than trying to force yourself to be happy and toxic positivity. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. We're very much focused around.
So come back to your current customers. What kind of things have they said after implementing this? You know, from an organisation perspective, not the individuals or utilising it, but from the organisation, what kind of things are they saying about, you know, the benefits to them after they've implemented?
It's brilliant to have an insight into how your people are feeling in real time. So traditionally, surveys have taken 3 months to report, then also another 3 months to then take all that information, distribute it, find out what's coming from it, and then announce that to your staff. By the time that's done, there's new issues, and also the people that were affected probably have left or gone off on sick or been less productive. So for us, they're very much focused around the fact that they have that real-time insight into how people are doing. They have that communications platform that they can do at a touch of a button. I think a lot of the companies that the main success, actually, to be honest, is that it reduces that kind of open stigma of mental health in businesses, where actually just by using the app, it gives them a point of reference to talk about mental health. So it's like, everyone, we've logged our mood this week. How is everyone feeling? And that, just because there's an action that they're using the app, means that actually it's easier to talk about because there's a focus point, rather than being, right, how's everyone doing today? It's like, well, what have you logged in your app? Let's all log in our apps. Let's talk about good things, bad things in the business. So it opens up, for smaller businesses, it opens up the culture side of things, where people are more likely to talk to each other because everyone knows that they're utilizing a tool as a combination of people. They're all going to be using it within the business. There's a commonality there. But then from an insights perspective, having that real-time pulse check is really crucial.
So coming on from that then, so what's the next thing that you're going to look into, either develop or include within the platform?
Great question. So in October, we're about to launch our insights program. So what that means is, at the moment, an individual can go in and see all of their data and trends, and it will signpost them to different content. But we're going to bring that report to people. So what it will do is it will learn from when you like to log in, when you like to be notified, how often you want to be contacted. It will learn what your mood trends have changed. It will produce that for you. So very much like Fitbit, it will say, did you know anxiety because of sleep has come up the most this month? Here's some sleep content, and here's someone you can speak to if you think this is becoming more of a problem. And we can then actually, through the AI and machine learning, start linking profiles by saying, actually, you're not alone. There are other people in our app who feel like this because they've been logging the same things, doing the same things. These tips and tricks have worked for them because we've seen the mood rating increase. And this is what our clinical psychologist network is saying they would recommend for someone who's experiencing the moods and triggers that you are. So we can share information through it. We're also then bringing in groups, which is quite exciting. We're being very careful how we do that. Because it's all anonymous for companies, you as an individual user can stick in a username, or, I could be called Charlie Winto 42, or however I want to be called. And you can add your family and friends by a username. And you can then see when your friends and family log in, and the smiley face. So if it's a yellow face, a green face, or a red face, that's all you'll see. But it's a great way to acknowledge, okay, my sister's got a red face today. She's just checked in. Maybe I should check my mood in and give her a call later to see how she's doing. So it's that kind of more openness of community, reducing that stigma by giving away a little bit of information of how people are doing and when they log in, so that you can support each other more effectively. So those are two exciting things. And the final one is that we're we're launching it for free in schools. So we're shortly going to be announcing that. I've obviously got to wait till it's finalised and we've got that funding secured, but we're going to be launching it for free in schools to educate young people on self-awareness around it, provide that safeguarding space so that we can see with schools what the trends are, whether it's eating disorders, whether it's bullying, whether it's exams, whether it's what is it that's bothering people in particular schools, and so we can support them a bit more effectively than we currently do.
Okay. What about, can you give I'm assuming that the information is there, but you may not have it available to present at the moment. Maybe giving businesses an idea of where they stand against similar business of, in a similar or, type of space. So if they're a recruitment business, just coming back from the beginning, how do they stand, against other recruitment businesses? Are they better or worse than them? What do they need to be doing to improve? Is that kind of thing that you could do or can do at the moment?
Yeah, we currently do it in a kind of quarterly update that I'll send out and the team will generate. So we look at trends across all businesses. We look at that industry side. We look at tips and tricks that have worked elsewhere, and we've seen success from. We want to automate all of that, so we'll just do that in the portal for you. But at the moment, it's manually done. But yes, that's a big area. I wanted to have very much like Glassdoor, the top 100 businesses in the UK or around the globe by OK Positive rating, so that people can go, right, okay, how are the moods of people in these businesses? That's something that we all want to celebrate our top businesses with. That's something for the future, I think.
Yeah, because you have a number of people like I think the Times do it and a few others where they talk about the best businesses to work at, based on a survey. Wouldn't it be good to be able to give people a picture of the best businesses by how the actual employees feel? How happy they are in their jobs and the roles within those businesses.
Yeah, and that's a focus because for us, it's to incentivize businesses. You tend to have to give them a point of difference, and you have to say, from a recruitment perspective, like that will be a massive bonus for businesses to say, look, our people are happier here and they're more satisfied with their working lives, based on how we treat them. And so the proof is in the pudding, and we're showing that. It's definitely an area we want to expand on. It's just an area that we've got to be careful with because some corporates don't want to be say it's lower. We've got to be very careful about showing that. We wouldn't necessarily show the highly negative ones and blame them or guilt them, because we need to work with them to make sure their people are feeling better about their working lives and their workplace. Those are the people that we need to help, because instead of just going, oh, this is a rubbish place to work, say, right, how do we fix it? How do we fix the culture? How do we encourage more people to refer people to work here, to want to come to work and to be productive?
And it'd be interesting to look across a particular vertical. So, looking across, retail finance, just picking something out, what is the common thread that people are having challenges with? Is it something to do with, you mentioned eating disorders? Are eating disorders a problem across that sector? Is it, the issue of pressure against KPIs? What's affecting people in a particular vertical, and understand what we need to do to actually improve things in those spaces as well?
Yeah, and for me, at the moment, I really just talk about trends of what we see across all of our companies. So as a whole group of users, and isolation last year was the highest negative emotion that people were feeling, which is probably to be assumed anyway. But yeah, in terms of the content, the most viewed content on our platform is suicide helplines. So that paints a quite dangerous.
Yeah, it's not a good picture, is it? That if people are looking at that type of content.
And the final piece that I'd say this year, from a workplace perspective, colleagues, it's 50-50 on whether they are a positive or a negative influence in your business. So team building, personality profiling, having that kind of those programs to get people, especially when they're remote working, to connect with each other and empathize a bit more, be more compassionate to each other, is going to be crucial, because it's an area that is sink or swim for businesses. It either will cause a massive amount of churn of staff, or it will be the making of that business. And we've seen that across our groups.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I've been speaking to a gentleman called Nathan Ott, who works at GC Index, and they do a lot of work around understanding an organisation, the individual organisation, how the culture works, and how positive they can be in what they do from a work perspective. And it's quite interesting that these two might fit quite well together in that space. Understanding how the culture is, but also understanding then the mental health of that organisation as well. So that there's some quite interesting things that could be out there. I remember the old ways that I think people did it with profiles. So looking at personality profiles like DISC and a number of others that are out there. It was very specific to one person rather than the organisation. So you can see it in different ways, and again, some of those we're looking at. Under stress, what's the behaviour of the individuals like? Does their behaviour change depending on the level of stress? And a common example for military people is that they become more focused under stress conditions, whereas non-military people tend to get less focused under stress. It's like the opposite way around that they behave, and it's just through the environment that they work in, isn't it? That's like funneled them to be like that and made them like that in the first place.
It's fight or flight, really, in that sense. So.
Yeah.
They talk about it in sport as well, explicit versus implicit skills. If you put a load of pressure on a professional golfer, for example, I did my dissertation on this. They're more likely to benefit from that if they're focused on the task and it's an explicit skill. But if you take an amateur to play golf and you put pressure on them, if they focus on it, they're more likely to fail. It's more important that they distract themselves from that situation, and they'll perform better. So it's funny how that works.
Yeah, and I teach shooting and I coach shooting, and I feel that I see the same thing. And one of the big problems you get, it's a bit like golf as well. Like when a golfer hits a bad shot, they can't get out of the head, and they can't. And the next one tends to be a bad one as well, and potentially the next and the next and the next. And it's same with shooting. We're doing shooting at targets, and if they have a bad shot, they can't get out of the head for the next and potentially next after that, and it takes a while to get themselves back on track. And I think also in shooting as well, we have a difference between boys and girls, because I work with youth organisations with the RFA cadets, and what you find is the boys and the girls are different in their approach to it. The girls aren't competitive with each other; they just think that they're trying to do the best at what they're doing. Whereas the boys think that they're actually competing with somebody, and if two of people are firing, they assume that if they do better with their shot, it's going to make the other one worse, but it doesn't. It doesn't affect them at all. And it's like golf. If you hit a really good ball, it's not going to affect the other person. Be either positively or negatively. It's what they're thinking about themselves, and they're going through the process themselves, isn't it? And it's quite interesting how boys and girls are different in their approach to that.
It's quite I'll touch more upon the kind of focus. You hit a bad shot and then it compounds itself because that's all you can focus on. That's a big part of, for me, OCD, things like that I struggle with, intrusive thoughts, things like that. I use the example of don't think about a white polar bear right now, Lee. Like what are you thinking about? You're not allowed to think about a white polar bear. What are you thinking about? You're thinking about a white polar bear because you're not allowed.
You put it in the mind, haven't you?
Yeah, and then you tell yourself that you're not allowed to do that again. It's the same with any skill that you're doing, whether it be at work on a project or whether it be a golf shot. The way that I think mental health support has looked to focus on that is very much moved towards noticing it. And one of the ways I remember there being a golfer called Luke Donald, who was a fairly decent golfer, there or thereabouts in some of the big competitions, but always struggled with focus. And he had a very big issue with compounding his shots, where if he hit a bad one, he'd focus on it. He couldn't let it go. It kept happening. So he brought in a coach that would look at his psychology of it. And this is something that might work with the shooting side of things, where put a blue tape around Luke Donald's wrist and went down to the driving range with him and got him to hit a shot. And every time he hit a good shot, because he wasn't, he could focus there because there was no pressure. Every time he hit the shot that he was looking to, he said, right now, stare at that blue ribbon for 15 seconds. Right, next time, stare at that ribbon for 30 seconds. Right, next time. And they just kept doing that. And so when he hit a bad shot in a tournament, he'd stare at the blue ribbon on his wrist, and then he'd line up his shot, and it would focus him, distract him, and he'd hit a perfect shot. He was number one in the world for a year after that. So there are ways that you look at it that it's for some people, and a big lesson of that is that it works for some people that won't work for others. A lot of people talk about mindfulness being something that, you know, a 50-year-old construction worker doesn't want to look at. Well, fine, but it's like when you go to the gym and you don't expect to come out looking like the Rock after one session, do you? You need to practice, you need to train. It's the same with mindfulness, but you need to manipulate and encourage yourself to want to do these things. Like you're not going to go and exercise if you don't persuade yourself to get out of bed and do it. You're not going to support your mental health unless you persuade yourself a reason to do it. Is it to support loved ones? Is it to support your mate in the pub? Like, and I know I'm going back to mental health here, but it's very interlinked with what we're talking about around focus, around compounding bad with bad, because humans, we always put things into good and bad, right? You know, you have a donut, that's bad. You have an apple, that's good. But actually, in terms of mental health, what we're trying to move towards is noticing. So actually noticing that I had a donut, which wasn't good or bad, it was something I wanted at the time. Now, how everyone knows, having a donut 1,400 times a day is going to be very bad for you because it's too sugary. But obsessing over having an apple, 100 apples a day, is also bad, because we've got to look at it as a way of going, you know, mental health is about how we notice how we're feeling and what makes us feel good, what makes us feel bad, what makes us feel strange, curious, frustrated, exhausted, anxious, happy, grateful, joyous, and then focus on more of the things that make us happier and more joyful. And if we can do that in the workplace, if we can do that in our home lives, we're less likely to be affected by the bad shots or the missed projects, the missed deadlines, that side of things.
Well, let's just remind people a few things. So, you know, we've got Charlie Winton on with us in the hot seat today. If you want to look at OK Positive, the website's www.okpositive.org. If you want to look at Charlie's details on LinkedIn, so there are Charlie's details at the bottom. And then finally, if you want to contact Charlie directly, here's Charlie's email address, so charlie@okpositive.co.uk. So before we go on to our final piece, which is actually a couple of questions we talked about before, anything else that you think you need to tell people about OK Positive and what you're trying to achieve there?
Really, it's more on the kind of human level, I think. For me, it's there'll be people in your life that you don't know that are going through something at the moment. There'll be people that you bump into on the street that you don't know what they're going through. I just urge people to start becoming more self-aware about mental health, whether you feel great or not. I've had friends who have said that, you know, they've never struggled with mental health. But for me, that's something you should learn about. You should understand why, so you can help other people with why that is that you don't struggle. And notice things, because the more you do that, the more you'll help yourself and others. From an OK Positive perspective, we're just trying to change the way businesses, you know, utilize culture as a way of supporting people and getting the most out of your business. So I'm happy to chat to anyone who needs someone to listen to them, to share lived experience. I'm by no means a therapist or a psychologist. I've got a clinical director who focuses around that area and a network of people that I trust on that. For me, I'm happy to speak to anyone who has something they'd want to share or learn more about my anxiety, OCD, and how I've dealt with it. So yeah, anyone wants to reach out, my details are there, and I'm happy to chat.
Okay, so coming on to our final two questions then. So I mentioned it before, you know, what's the best meal you've ever had? What was it? Where was it? And why was it the best meal?
So I think the best meal I've ever had was, I would say it's going to sound silly, but went up to a place called Skew up in the west coast of Scotland with my mum and her partner and my fiance, and had this massive seafood platter thing together. Mainly because it was more the family side of things, and the food was just like fresh out of the ocean. So it was one of the things where, like, yeah, everyone was sharing food. It was a great experience, a great memory, and the people around the table were brilliant. So one of the best. I've got a couple more, but yeah, if I were to pick one that I'd have to eat for the rest of my life. that
would be the one.
That would be it.
I say to a lot of people, and it's like music. You know, food ties you to a point in time, to an experience. and it links you there. And when you smell something, you know, that was tied to that particular meal, so if you smell lobster, if there was lobster on the menu or something, it links you back to that memory, doesn't it? And it's same with music. You know, a particular experience happened, and there's a particular piece of music playing. You hear it again, and it links you back to that experience, doesn't it? And that's why I think
Completely.
it's a great thing to ask people. You know, what's the best meal? It's not. I said to you before. It's not always what it's you're eating. It's sometimes either where or who you're with or what you're celebrating as it's important about it. So
Completely.
the other thing, and I'm assuming because with the early connotations of wanting to be a marine researcher and things, what's the most adventurous thing you've done?
I went on that trip away when I was scaffolding. I went to Port Lincoln in Australia and swam with great white sharks. So I really love sharks to bits. I think they're
By
very,
choice.
yes, by choice. I
'Cause
absolutely.
I would want to question your mental illness, your mental
I
health,
would
if
have
you
wanted
actually
to
chose
go.
to swim with white sharks.
I wanted to go without a cage because they're very misunderstood creatures. I think 6 deaths across the world from sharks a year. I mean, you wouldn't want to know how many sharks we kill. From my perspective, seeing them in the water, and for people who are worried about sharks and things like that when they go abroad, we had to travel 5 hours at 5:30 in the morning on a boat to a particular island in Port Lincoln. We had to chum the water for 45 minutes in an area that it's known for breeding there, for us to even maybe get the chance of seeing a shark. So
Yeah.
if that consoles anyone, and even then, even though they're there to eat, they weren't particularly menacing. They were just massively gracious, huge, graceful sort of things. They're just, yeah, I love sharks. I think they're brilliant. They don't scare me as much as, say, like a giant squid would or something like that. But yeah, no, great white shark. I'd recommend it for anyone who hasn't tried some form of shark swimming. It's incredible.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of creatures in the sea that people die from more. Certain jellyfish like Portuguese man of war, people get stung and can die from. I bet there's more deaths through those kind of things than there are from sharks.
Yeah, I think sharks are, yeah, wildly misunderstood creatures, and the fact that we go swimming into the water, it's like you cross a road, there might be a car, mightn't there? You got to watch out for them,
Yeah,
be careful,
very
choose
true.
times and things like that. So it's the exact same thing.
That's it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've just about run out of time. So, if you could stay on afterwards, and we'll have a quick chat afterwards because we're just coming up to 58 minutes live now. So, thanks ever so much for joining today. It's been great to have you on. Great to get your insight into mental illness and issues around it in the workplace. Especially with your experiences in that first role. Working in the recruitment business. You've seen it yourself, so it's much easier for you to then understand it going forward, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you very much for
All right.
letting me come on and chat.
No problem at all. I'll catch you in a few minutes.
Cheers.
And everyone else, hopefully we'll have another guest for you next Tuesday. Hopefully not as short notice as this week, but please look out 2 o'clock every Tuesday, and we're going to find someone to give you some insights into their life, their journey, and what they're doing at the moment. Thanks a lot. Bye.